All right, I nailed the timing with the logo this week. That's the
Yeah, you
first
did.
time in like three or
Yeah, you
four,
did.
probably a month since I've done that right. Welcome back to another episode of Give That Fan a Podcast. I'm your host Ryan Blake. That's my co-host Paul Valley. We are live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Thank you to those of you who are tuning in. I went to Facebook to try to share the stream to my personal page, and I can't find it. But it says that Orioles 24/7 is live, so I don't know. There it is. Let's hit that share button. Share to my friends. Paul, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm ready for tomorrow. I'm ready for free agency to get started. Not sure that they're going to do much anything. Somebody's going to do something outrageous tomorrow. You just know it's going to happen. But I'm not sure it's going to be the Orioles yet. But I'm excited to get this off season going and see what they can cook up here. How are you?
Yeah, we are. I'm great, man. We talked a little bit last week about our cats, and my girlfriend, my fiance, and I keep calling her my girlfriend. We our neighbors who they're close friends of ours, and they happen to live in the same apartment complex. They had a cat just kind of walk into their apartment on Friday, and they're not necessarily equipped for a cat. We already have two, and so we took them in, went to get them checked for a microchip, posted on our community boards, trying to find the owners. No luck so far, and poor guy's not doing too well. He hasn't been eating much. He's congested. He keeps I guess whatever a cat version of a cough is. He's been doing that, sneezing a good bit. Hasn't really eaten the last few days. So
Is he going to be okay? What did the vet say?
Uh, well, we just got back a little bit ago. It was our third vet trip in 5 days. They think it's so. I'm going to say this, and people are going to be confused if you're not familiar with cats. Herpes is what they are pretty convinced it is.
Oh wow. Okay.
It's not the kind of herpes that humans get. It's more of a respiratory thing. The symptoms are more runny nose, congestion, coughing, things like that. But I've got like 5 or 6 different medications. He's been in this room because we can't expose him to our other cats, and that's risky, So I got my bobbleheads missing off these little things in the back. They're all up here in front of me on the desk. So this has become his home. I straightened it up today so it didn't look like crap in the background of the show. But yeah, I guess we have a third cat now, and I think he's going to be all right. They gave him some fluids tonight. He was pretty dehydrated. So hoping for the best.
I hope he'll be okay. I certainly wouldn't want to see anything happen to the little fellow. We got 2 cats. I got one directly behind me. She keeps meowing at me. That's Frankie. And I can hear Lena outside trying to get into the room, like pawing at the door.
Yeah.
So, but they are not sick, as far as we know. But
that's good. Yeah, my other 2 cats have been in great health since we've gotten them. It was a respiratory infection that lasted a few days when we first got one of them, but all in all, pretty good. But enough about cats. That's 2 episodes in a row. We'll try to make it 3 next time. This is our off-season preview episode, and so there's a lot to go over. First, I want to talk about a couple things directly related to the Orioles. I misspoke on the last show and said that we would find out if Hyde won Manager of the Year this past Monday. That was incorrect. That was the finalists were announced on Monday, but Brandon Hyde is a finalist for AL Manager of the Year, along with Terry Francona and Scott Service. Paul, you nailed that last week. I think those were the 3 clear frontrunners.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the 3 nominees. That winner will be announced next Tuesday, the 15th at 6 p.m. on MLB Network. The night before that, Monday at 6 p.m., the AL Rookie of the Year will be announced. Adley Rutschman, as expected, a finalist for that. Don't expect him to take it home. I think Julio has that locked up. I think he has for a while. But Stephen Kwan, the 3rd representative in the American League.
I don't know if you can hear me or not, but this is like the 12th time you've frozen on the show with me. And when
that's not ideal.
Yeah, but each time like you'll freeze for like a split second, and then whatever you said comes through like in fast forward, and gets me called up live.
Oh, I hate that.
That time you froze for like 10 seconds though, so I didn't hear what you said after. I don't think he'll take it home, but I said nope, and then you were.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, someone who's listening, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, wherever, drop us a comment. Let me know if that's coming up on your end. It probably is.
It might just be my slow Mac.
That's the thing. These things happen on Zoom and StreamYard and wherever, and it's hard to tell exactly who is at fault or if anybody is at fault.
Right.
And obviously, I'm not listening. Maybe I'll text Megan and have her tune in for a minute. Maybe
Sorry,
she.
I just got back from the gym and I got to get my little shake in.
No worries, no worries at all. So,
Yeah,
I,
yeah, I don't think Adley's going to win, despite having a higher WAR in less games
right.
than Julio. But look, we knew he was going to be a finalist basically by August or September anyway. And look, if he finishes top two, he enters free agency a year earlier than he would have otherwise. So good for Adley. Good. Honestly, I love it because I think it's going to force the Orioles to extend him sooner rather than later. So all good things here.
Absolutely, and hopefully we're in a similar boat with Gunnar Henderson this time next year.
Yeah.
But we shall see. Orioles made a couple roster moves today. They declined the $11 million club option on right-handed pitcher Jordan Lyles. He was good, Paul. For what the Orioles gave him last year, $7 million deal. He did exactly what the Orioles expected him to do. He pitched 179 innings, had a 4.42 ERA, which was his lowest since 2019. Dean Kramer was the next highest uh, innings guy on the team with 125. So Lyles did exactly what was expected of him when he was brought aboard.
Yeah, he won 12 games. He was better this year than he was last year. Uh, for $7 million, the Orioles got a bulldog. And I mean, when you look at it, you can look at it glass half full or glass half empty. When it comes to denying or declining the option, do you want to pay $11 million to a guy who was a one-win player last year? When we're talking about WAR, and probably not. And are you going to use now? Now the question is, are you going to use that $11 million to go pay somebody who's better? Um, that's what remains to be seen. So my initial reaction to it was, I was surprised that the option wasn't picked up, but it depends. Now if the Orioles go out and they use that money to get somebody better, then I can't be upset about it. But it's a wait and see approach. I will tell you that my co-host and producer Zach Goodman on the Bat Around was not pleased about it. He did not understand not giving him the $11 million, but we'll see what happens.
I don't really get it either. I fully expected them to pick up the option.
Mm-hmm.
With that being said, I understand it, and hopefully this might be a bit of a leap, but hopefully it's a precursor to we're going to go out and get some legitimate arms for this rotation. Now, Jordan Lyles is a great back end guy, but he was the Orioles' number 2 last year, and you want someone better than that in that role.
Yes.
Now, Lyles was great in terms of, like I said, he did what was expected of him, but 4.42 ERA is not great. That's on par for what we needed,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not great going forward for a team that needs to
It's
contend.
enough to
So
keep you in a major league rotation, but
yeah,
there's not much more than that. And I mean, that's basically a guy that 2 out of every 3 times out is going to go out there and give you a quality start, and that's basically what he did this year.
yeah, I think it's less of lack of confidence in him and more so faith in the arms that the Orioles already have.
Yeah.
And like I said, maybe a precursor to something bigger, but we'll see. That's the big news today. Smaller move: the Orioles claimed outfielder Daz Cameron off waivers from the Detroit Tigers. Another guy, kind of like Jake Cavepal, who I guess is in the mix for 4th outfield spot if he even makes it all the way to camp. He's not a big, he's got average power, not really an on base guy, solid speed, good defender, but in 73 major league games has an OPS under 600. What do you make of this?
Former first round pick, former top 100 prospect. Look, it's
First round pick of the Astros, by the way.
Yeah, it's a guy that Michael Elias is going to take a flyer on. Do I think he's going to be on the big league club on opening day? Probably not. I look at him as outfield depth. It's hard for me to care. You know what I mean?
I get that.
One way or the other about a guy like Daz Cameron or Jake Cave. If a guy's a 4th outfielder, I mean, who's the best 4th outfielder that you can think of off the top of your head from the last 10 years? You probably think Jared Dyson, right?
I guess, yeah.
It's not really anything that, and I'm not trying to take any like deflate your balloon or anything like that. I don't have really any thoughts about Daz Cameron. I think it's a depth move, and if he gets a cup of coffee in the major leagues, then all right, you know,
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of whatever for me. I kind of downplayed the Jake Cave move as well. Doesn't do
yeah.
much for me. Maybe he's in the mix for that fourth outfield
It
spot, but
it certainly
you know.
can be exciting because he had the talent to be drafted in the first round and the
Yeah,
talent
there
to
is some
be
upside there.
a top 100 prospect. And like I said, it gives you depth in the organization. They have so many outfielders that are prospects in their organization already, and I just look at it and I'm like, all right, well, I'll get excited when he starts putting up numbers at AAA and is forcing the Orioles' hand. Until then, it's a minor move in November.
Yeah, this is the kind of move where if it happened in 2018, I'd be like, oh, cool. There's a guy who used to be a pretty highly touted prospect and has a shot to stick on the roster. And now, because I think we're expecting liftoff, as Mike Elias described it, and we'll get into that in a second,
Yeah.
it doesn't move the needle one way or the other. It's just kind
Now,
of a move.
is he a lefty or a righty bat?
I've seen him bat righty for sure. I don't think
Okay.
he's a switch hitter.
Okay. Yeah. If it was a left-handed bat, I might get a little bit more because Elias loves him some left-handed bats. Doesn't seem like he strikes out a ton, but
He strikes out a good bit, or
he
he
does. You know
has in
what?
the minors.
I was looking at somebody. You know what? I was looking at somebody else's. There were a bunch of different. So I watched the Mass and All Access podcast today, and they did their top 8 free agents for backup catcher, rotation. Um, uh, I think it was like
Oh,
a
their
middle
bracket thing,
infielder.
right?
Yeah, they did their bracket thing, and I think I was looking up a bunch of players, and one of them I was surprised doesn't strike out a ton, but I digress.
Yeah, he's 20. I think it was a 26% K rate throughout his minor league career. So
Yeah,
not ideal for a guy you want to be able to get on base and steal some bags. So Mike Elias made some comments yesterday with John Morosi at the GM meetings. One thing that stood out to me was that he seems to have no plans to trade Anthony Santander. He
yeah.
didn't completely rule it out, but he was talking about how he's been valuable as the 3-hitter all year. He plays a solid right field, and then described him as a switch hitting DH, which I thought was a little strange.
You caught that
But
too.
I did.
I tweeted about that today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't see that, but yeah, it's definitely interesting.
Yeah. He said he played he played a good right field for us. He's a switch hitting DH, and it made me think. Like when he said that, I went, huh. It may have been a little eye opener into or a little glimpse into what their plans are in the outfield. That maybe Santander is more a plan to be their DH than to be in the outfield.
Yeah, I think that could certainly be the case, and we'll talk about some names here soon that we think, a potential signing for the outfield or the DH role. Maybe someone who can split a little bit of time with Mountcastle at first base, spell him a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Elias said no real strategy in moving him, which makes sense because he was one of your best hitters this past season.
Yeah, I also Elias always does what he says he's going to do, right? But I also don't. I take what he says in these interviews with a grain of salt because he
Yeah,
plays everything so close to the vest that he does. Nobody's privy to what's going on in his head. So he's going to sit there and say because Anthony Santander is still on the roster, he's going to say we have no plans to trade him. That doesn't mean he doesn't have plans to trade him. But maybe he has to be blown away or has to be part of a package for something that is going to blow him away. But we'll
right.
see. You could do worse than having a guy who hit 33 home runs in your lineup this year.
For sure, especially a switch hitter, and a guy who improved his walk rate tremendously, which was huge.
Yeah.
Speaking of things that Mike Elias says that you may or may not need to take with a grain of salt, a few other quotes from that interview. He said, "We're going to get started with addressing our major league needs as soon as possible." Went on to say, "I expect a very active offseason for us," which is something he said before.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a lot different than the rebuilding kind of off seasons that I've had since I've been here. That quote kind of fires me up a little bit.
Yeah.
And then one more, he said, "We're turning our focus toward augmenting this growing core that we're seeing at the major league level. In what way, shape, or form that's coming in, I don't really know yet. We're just going to go out on the market and try to make some wise acquisitions." That's a little less heartening than the previous quote because it almost leads me to believe that they don't have any specific plans to go out and get a big name, but maybe he is fully intending on that and just doesn't want to say it. Like you said, he likes to keep things close.
Well, yeah, I'm looking at it again. In what way, shape, or form that's coming in, I don't really know yet. One, you can't talk about free agents, right? And not until they're actually free agents, and because it's tampering. And so
Oh, that's true. Okay, I didn't think about that.
he's not going to tell us. Oh yeah, we've been in contact with Trey Turner's agent, or we've been in, and look, I'm naming the guys that like just so that we don't. The chances that the Orioles get Trey Turner and Aaron Judge are not high, but we've never seen this regime. Not to rhyme. We've never seen this group have an off season where they're trying to acquire talent for the major league roster. We saw what Dan Duquette did when his direct boss was Peter Angelos. Different guy that in ownership in John Angelos, different GM in Mike Elias, and a different maybe even business outlook for the franchise in general. So I'm not writing off any of the big free agents. I don't think they're coming because why are they going to choose Baltimore over LA or New York or Boston? But I just think that he's not going to say one way or the other what he's going to do. So that's basically just GM speak for we're doing something we're just not going to tell you.
Right. It's one of those things where we'll see what happens when it actually happens. I don't think there are going to be a lot of leaks to the media that say, Orioles showing interest in XYZ player.
And think about this. You're not
I don't think we're going to see a ton of that.
Yeah, you're not hearing about any
right.
team. No team is being leaked to have interest in anybody. Tomorrow,
well, not yet. I know they can't yet. I'm just saying, like, throughout the offseason, I don't expect to see a whole lot of connections to the Orioles until a signing actually happens. Now, we might get something from Jeff Passan or Ken Rosenthal that says the Orioles are close on somebody, but I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of, the Orioles have reached out to this player's agent.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to see a ton of that because I don't think Elias is going to tell anybody.
And what I am fairly confident in is that if you remember 2012 through 2017, 2018 really, Dan Duquette wouldn't sign somebody till late February, early March. And we're sitting there through the GM meetings, through the winter meetings, through January, like, what the hell is going on? How have you not signed anybody? I don't think we're going to be doing that this year. I think that you're going to see Elias move a bit quicker than that.
I think so too. And in fact, I was looking at the Astros past transaction log, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but I did notice that it was after, I believe, the 2015 season when they had their first above 500 record in a while.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was either November or December, but it was before the calendar flipped. He traded away both Jonathan Villar and Jed Lowry, who were half-decent pieces of that infield.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that was pretty quick once the season ended. So I expect something similar from him. I think that's the way he operates. Now, obviously, he wasn't the one making that trade, but I'm sure he had some influence in that decision.
So Mike Elias has been behind a Jonathan Villar trade not once but twice.
Yeah.
That poor guy probably never wants to see that guy's face ever again.
Yeah. No. So let's go ahead and talk about who we would like to see the Orioles sign, because I know everybody's been floating out a bunch of names. We're going to start with kind of what is the ultimate dream, things that we know probably won't happen, but if it was a perfect world, what would we like to see? And then we'll get into some more realistic signings that we could actually envision happening. So I have, I think, 6 of each written down. I know you've got a few in your head. You've been having talks like this on all your shows the last couple of weeks. But I want to start by kind of looking at some names. And I guess I didn't think about Mass and All Access doing their little bracket thing, but I want to look at each position and throw out a few names of players that might be a fit on the Orioles.
Sure.
They're potentially in the market for a backup catcher.
Mm-hmm. They should
and
be.
Some names. Well, this is what I wanted to talk about. I've kind of sold myself on Jacob Nottingham a little bit as a backup, and it's not necessarily because I love Jacob Nottingham. It's because I think a lot of the names that are on the free agent market are not going to sign to be a backup.
Yeah.
And the others, the ones that would sign to be a backup, I think are going to be too expensive to warrant being a backup. And then it's bottom of the barrel, and you're going to end up with another Robinson Chirinos. And so I kind of like the idea of Nottingham. But if they do end up going out and signing a catcher, because then now they only have 2 on the 40-man roster. It's Adley and Mark Colesbury.
Mm-hmm.
We've got Roberto Perez is out there, Christian Vasquez, Tucker Barnhart, Austin Hedges, Jason Castro, Mike Zunino, and Kurt Casale, to name a few. I left off Wilson Contreras and Gary Sanchez because I don't see either of those happening. Yeah. Do any of those names strike your fancy?
Roberto Perez and Tucker Barnhart, I think they're both really good defensive catchers that have at least a little bit of offensive upside. People need to realize real fast that you're not getting a backup catcher that's good offensively. They don't exist, because if they're good offensively, they're starting catchers. There just aren't enough in the league that are good offensive players. So for me, it's Roberto Perez or Tucker Barnhart. I look at the other guys. I look at Christian Vasquez. His best offensive years are far behind him, and so are his best defensive years. Austin Hedges I think he had like a 449 OPS last year.
Yeah, he can't hit.
Yeah, Jason Castro hasn't hit since 2017. Mike Zunino. Mike Zunino is a guy who might hit 190, but he could hit 20 home runs. But
I think he had 35 a couple years ago.
Yeah, that's a dude who probably is looking for a starting job. And then the Kurt Casale, not much of a hitter either. I think he had a below 600 OPS, but really good defender. Austin Hedges might be the best defender out of all of them. But if it's my money, if they end up with Roberto Perez or Tucker Barnhart, I won't be upset about
it. Ironically, those are my two favorites as well. I was looking at Roberto Perez's pages. He had a breakout year in 2019 with the Guardians, I guess the Indians at the time, but he had 24 home runs. He's never had,
wasn't he?
Yeah, and he won 2 straight Gold Gloves. He's never had another double-digit home run season.
Right.
So maybe a flash in the pan there, but good defensive catcher. And I wouldn't be disappointed with that by any stretch. He is 34. He will be 34 before the season starts. Barnhart will be 32. But again, it's backup catcher. Chirinos was what, 38?
Yeah. I had sold myself on Aramis Garcia, and so then when he declined the option to the outright assignment to AAA and became a free agent, that was because he's a good defender, good pitch framer. I had sold myself on him as an internal option. I don't really. I wasn't excited about him, but I could have gotten him on board because of the defense and the pitch framing. And now that he's out of the organization, for me, Perez or Barnhart.
I kind of felt that way about who was it, Cam Gallagher.
Okay.
But we don't have those options anymore, unfortunately. Let's move on to first base, because there is some talk about maybe a first base DH type. You've got Brandon Belt out there, Jose Abreu, Anthony Rizzo, Josh Bell. And then guys like Miguel Sano and Carlos Santana, who haven't been hitting much lately, and Trey Mancini. Look, I've seen a lot of people talk about wanting to bring Trey home now that he went out and got his World Series, bring him back to Baltimore, help him guide the youngsters. I'm going to shut that down right now.
No.
It's not happening.
No.
It should not happen. It will not happen. You need to be able to put the idea of winning above sentimentality at some point.
Exactly. And after the Astros won the World Series, a couple of people tweeted at me when I said, good for Trey and all that, tweeted at me, now bring him back home. And I was like, no, don't bring him back home. Like I said, and I don't want there to be a misconception that I don't like Trey Mancini. I love Trey Mancini. I'm a huge fan of his, but I also want somebody that can come in and actually be an impact bat. And he's, as much as I hate to say it, he's not an impact bat anymore. So Trey Mancini, for me, he's not even close to my wish list.
Yeah. Two of those names, however, are, for me personally at least, for a while, the guy for me was Josh Bell. And it's no secret he had a rough second half and then struggled in the playoffs as well.
Mm-hmm.
You texted me at one point to say that you've seen absolutely nothing from Josh Bell that led you to believe that he was going to turn things around, which I understand. He looked bad. And then we got on your podcast, or on your show, the Bat Around, and you and, was it Luke Jackson?
Luke Jackson.
You guys kind of sold me on Jose Abreu. What's your line of thinking with Abreu?
So Abreu's just a professional hitter, and even though the power was down, the average was still above 300. The production was still there. I think he only hit 16 home runs this year, but I still think he drove in close to 80. He hit like 301 this year, and that's a guy who, yeah, maybe the wall scares him off, but he can hit the ball all over the field. If guys get on base, he's going to give you a quality bat and drive them home. So many times we saw first and second, nobody out, and you have Santander, Mountcastle, and Austin Hayes coming up, and you get two strikeouts and a pop out, or three strikeouts, and the guys don't even advance. And I don't think you're going to see that too often with a hitter like Jose Abreu. I think you can bring him in, and even though you probably have 3 or 4 guys in the roster that can hit more home runs than him, you can put him at 4 in your lineup and know that he's going to get the job done day in and day out. And he can spell Mountcastle at first base every now and again. For me, Abreu is at the top of my wish list. I don't know how likely it is, especially because at his age, he's not going to want to play with that wall in left field. But money talks.
This is true. We'll get some more into the first baseman later on because I know I have a couple on my dream list here. Let's move on around the infield a little bit. The Orioles perhaps will go out and sign a second baseman. Here's the thing. It's so hard to predict all of this because it seems like half the offense at this point is a trade candidate. Whether you look at even as high up as Mullins, Hayes could be traded, Santander could be traded, Stowers could be traded. Look across the infield, Arias, Jorge Mateo, all of those guys, none of them would shock me if they ended up traded. So
Right.
it's so hard to predict what's going to happen. But if the Orioles end up hanging on to Ramon Arias and Jorge Mateo, then the outfield gets a little more crowded, and they probably don't sign someone like this. But if they end up moving one or both of those guys, Gene Segura, Adam Frazier, Josh Harrison, Donovan Solano, Cesar Hernandez, Hanser Alberto, none of those names really interest me much. I feel like we'd be dealing with another Rougned Odor.
None. If you want to bring in Josh Harrison and say be our super utility guy, I guess I could get on board with that. But if you're talking about any of the second basemen that are on this list that are out there, there's not any one of them that I want to see play above Connor Norby or Jordan Westburg. So for me, it's a big fat zero. I'm not looking at them signing any of the second basemen on the free agent market.
Neither am I. I'm going to keep moving through this a little bit, and then we'll get to our wish list here.
Sure.
Third base, some names: Matt Carpenter, Brandon Drury, Jace Peterson, Charlie Culberson, Matt Duffy. Shortstop is where the big names are: Carlos Correa, Trey Turner, Dansby Swanson, Xander Bogaerts. I threw up Elvis Andrus there in my notes. He seemed to be a little more productive this season with the White Sox. In the outfield, the big guys: Aaron Judge, Joey Gallo's in there, Brandon Nimmo, Jock Peterson, Michael Conforto, Andrew Benintendi. All some names I've seen floated around out there. Jurickson Profar, David Peralta. I think most of those guys I just named are lefties. A couple DHs out there: JD Martinez, Andrew McCutchen, and then a whole plethora of starting pitchers. And so I'll start with you, Paul. Do you have, first of all, any names that I just went through? Do any of them really stand out to you?
Any of them stand out? I mean, of all the names that you went through, because there's a bunch that stand out. For
Well,
sure.
Okay, let's go ahead and start with our dream free agent list here.
Sure.
So I mentioned some starting pitchers. I'm not going to rattle them all off, but some names that I've seen floated around: Jacob deGrom, Carlos Rodon, Noah Syndergaard, Chris Bassett, Mike Clevenger, and today Ross Stripling. Those are all names I've seen Orioles fans say, bring them on. What's your dream free agent acquisition? We'll take turns here and see how we compare, I guess.
Talking about the starting pitcher?
Anybody.
The
one free agent you could sign. You get first pick.
Oh, man. So I've been on the Aaron Judge train since about late June. Despite how poor he was in the playoffs, despite the fact that he's had an injury-riddled career, when that dude's healthy, he's probably the scariest hitter in all of baseball. So for me, if you can get Aaron Judge on a 4 to 5 year deal where you're paying him $40 to $50 million a year, and you can put him in the heart of your order, you talk about striking fear in the opposing pitcher. That's the one dude out on the market this offseason that you can sign where you automatically put yourself in the playoffs as far as I'm concerned if you have Aaron Judge hitting 4 in this lineup. So for me, it's Aaron Judge, number 1A.
I'm going to pull up a comment here from Chris on Facebook. I think the backup first baseman should be lefty. Besides Stowers and Cave, we have no lefty coming off the bench. I think that's going to change a lot in upcoming years, as a lot of our guys coming up through the system are big left-handed bats in Stowers, Kjerstad, and others. Um, I don't disagree with that. And that's part of why I think Josh Bell is a good fit. Switch hitter, so he can come in against righties and hopefully hit well. I mean, obviously he's a guy you don't really want coming off the bench unless you have to. But I mean, I don't think they're going to go after a guy like Anthony Rizzo because he's going to play first every day, and Ryan Mountcastle's already there. Brandon Belt, same thing. I don't really see that happening. So I'm not sure there are other real backup first base options that are left-handed unless you want to start digging a little lower in the barrel. But I don't disagree that this team is at the present lacking in a big left-handed bat. Even Anthony Santander, who had a great season this year, was way better against left-handed pitchers as a right-handed batter than he was from the other side.
I mean, but
so
you look at this lineup though, and like from right now, and where it's probably going to be in June or July, and you're looking at Cedric Mullins. More often than not, you got Cedric Mullins, Anthony Santander, Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson, and then you're looking at Kyle Stowers. You're looking at Colton Cowser. I mean, you have 6 guys potentially in your everyday lineup that are hitting left-handed more often than not. So for me, like, yeah, it'd be nice to have a lefty off the bench, but I'm not too concerned about it because there's gonna be a point where we won't believe how many left-handed hitters are in this lineup.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. All right, so continuing with I guess our dream acquisitions, I had Judge on my list as well. I put him at 5 years, 200 mil. You think that's light? You think he gets more than that? I really don't know. I have no idea how that market's going to shape up.
He's gonna want more than that. I mean, remember this is a guy who turned down what, like 30.5 million from the Yankees this past season.
Yeah, something like that.
He turned down 7 years, 215 million, I think it was, or 213.5 million is what he turned down over 7 years. That's 30.5 million. He's looking to get Trout type of money. He wants 36 to 40 million dollars a year. If he's expecting more than 5 years, somebody's gonna be stupid enough to give him that. If the Orioles go more than 5 years on Judge, I'll be happy about it, but I don't want them doing that because the end of that contract is not going to be pretty for them. But I think it's realistic. $40 million a year for Judge is very realistic. Might be low.
It might be. It might be. I think that's a pretty reasonable wish list, though. I'm going to move on to the shortstop that I'd like to see the Orioles sign, and that's Trey Turner. I put him down at 7 years, 240 mil. That's probably a little light. He's probably going to get more money than that, maybe even more duration. We'll see. But I mean, one of the most well-rounded players in baseball has been for the last 3-4 years. I don't know how you can be disappointed with a guy like Turner. And maybe you keep Mateo and you move Turner to second base. I think he'd be just fine there. He's become a little closer to average on the defensive side of the ball, but definitely a great infielder and someone who would immediately give a massive boost to the lineup.
Well, yeah, and am I allowed to take somebody that you took? Because that was if Judge's my 1A, Turner's my 1B, and it might actually be flip flopped. It might be Turner 1A and Judge 1B. For me, Trey Turner is
mine were in no particular order, by the way.
Okay. Well, Trey Turner is the guy for me. You sign him, he automatically hits in the top third of your order. He's not going to bat fourth, but he's going to hit first, second, or third. He's going to steal a ton of bags. He's going to hit for average. He's going to hit for power a little bit, maybe less power at Camden Yards, but he's a spray hitter anyway. So for me, Trey Turner is that dude that you just put him in your lineup and you let him go, and he sets the table for you. If the Orioles signed Trey Turner, I would be giddy as a schoolboy.
Yeah, I think that's the ideal move as well. I would prefer him over Judge. I have to agree with you there.
He wants to come back east, from what I've heard. So
we will welcome him with open arms.
Yes, sir.
Speaking of former Nationals, I had Josh Bell on my list. I know you've kind of talked me out of him a little bit. I still am a big fan of his. I put him at 3 years, $39 million. I think that's pretty reasonable. And I don't
know that $13 million a year is enough for Josh Bell.
You don't think?
I mean, because the number's going to be there. You're talking about a guy who's probably going to hit 270 to 290, 30 homers, close to 100 ribeyes, and he's a switch hitter. Uh, Josh Bell's going to get more than 13 million a year. I can't imagine he gets, and he's only 30. I can't
That's
imagine
true.
he gets less than. I think he's an $18 million a year player, and that's on the low end. If the Orioles signed Josh Bell, I'd be happy about it because even though he struggled I believe exactly what I said to you was, I've been watching Josh Bell this postseason, and I've seen nothing that I've been impressed with.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so that doesn't mean I don't think he can be impressive. The numbers back it up. I think I might still be gun shy because of the previous Josh Bell that came through Baltimore, and he was a top prospect for the Dodgers. The Orioles got him in a trade, and his claim to fame was he homered off of Cliff Lee to the opposite field on Sunday on Saturday baseball on Fox.
Didn't he
And
homer off of him twice that game?
yes, he homered off of him twice, and then you never heard of him again. So when I hear the name Josh Bell, I immediately get the shakes because of that guy. And maybe that's kind of flooding my or blinding me a little bit. But Josh Bell's a good player, and if the Orioles ended up with Josh Bell, they could do a hell of a lot worse.
I agree. Spot Track does have his market value at about a little over 18 mil a year. So yeah, I might lowball him there a little bit, but he's a guy I love in the lineup. Yeah, he had his struggles down the stretch. He's always been a bit of a streaky hitter, but even when he's in the worst slump of his career, he's going to get on base about 31 to 32% of the time. And when he's on, it's going to be a lot more than that.
Yeah.
And so he's a guy I like a lot. So I had 3 pitchers on my list as well. Did you want to point out anybody else before I go?
DeGrom, it would have to be a small deal like what you put on here. For those of you who can't see it, he put 1 year, $46 million with a mutual option for DeGrom. He's gonna want a mega contract, but he's made, what is it, 15 starts, 16 starts the last 2 years. Or no, I'm sorry, he's made 26 starts the last 2 years combined. He's the best pitcher in baseball if he can stay healthy, but he hasn't for 2 years. That's a guy that they've been rumored to be in on. If they're in on him and it's more than 1 year, I don't think Mike Elias is doing a great job. You can't sign him to a long-term contract because you don't know that you're not going to be paying him to be on the IL for half of his stint here. Clayton Kershaw, I just think is such a pipe dream. I think that it's either Dodgers or bust. There are people who think he might go back home to Texas and pitch for the Rangers. I don't think Clayton Kershaw. It's either Dodgers or he retires. So for me, Clayton Kershaw is just not realistic. I know that's why it's on the dream list. Rafael Montero's a good one. I'm big in on Chris Bassett, but I also think that the Orioles are more likely to add pitching through trade than through free agency.
Okay, so while we're talking about what's more likely, let's go ahead and move on to our more realistic, some things we can actually envision the Orioles doing this offseason.
Sure.
So I mentioned before that I've kind of talked myself into Jacob Nottingham at catcher, and for that reason, I did not put a backup catcher on this list. But as we discussed earlier, it's Roberto Perez is a solid option. Tucker Barnhart as well. So we'll see what happens at catcher.
I have no idea what's realistic for catcher. They could sign a backup, or they could just have a competition of internal options. I have no idea.
That's why I kind of figured maybe I'll look at Jacob Nottingham, and even someone like Maverick Hanley could compete for it. I think they're going to want to see him at AAA a bit. Yeah, Cumberland's been in the system. It feels like 50 years. Yeah. I'd love to see him get an opportunity. All right, I really like the idea of signing someone who would be pretty much your full-time DH. Whether that comes with a trade of someone like Anthony Santander, I don't know. But I have both Josh Bell and Jose Abreu on my list. Bell, I put 3 years, $39 million. It's probably going to cost more than that. Abreu, I put 1 year, $14 million. Does that seem like a deal that he would take at this stage in his career?
No.
You don't think so? You think he's looking for 2 years or more money?
Maybe both. I think you're lucky if you get him for less than $16 million a year. And again, just like I say, $18 million is on the low end for Josh Bell. $16 million a year for Abreu might be on the low end because he's still a productive quality hitter. Abreu 1 year, $14 million. I don't see him signing that deal. I think he'll get better offers than that from some other team, from multiple teams. around the league.
I could see it. His market value on Spot Track is 9.1 million, which it does seem low. I think I don't know. That's the thing. Going into every offseason, we have an idea what we think the market's going to look like, and it always gets turned on its head.
You remember when Jason Castro got like $11 million a year from the
Yeah,
Twins, and everybody was like, "Where the hell did that come from? He's worth like $3 million a year." That's what's going to happen with Abreu. Abreu, somebody's going to offer him, and it could be the Orioles, maybe, but maybe Elias is looking at that and saying, "No, he's not really worth more than $9 million." Somebody's going to offer that dude 2 years, $30+ million, and I don't think that's gonna. I would love it, but I don't think it's going to be the Orioles.
I could see it. Okay, so we talked
Brandon
about Josh
Nimmo.
Bell.
Brandon Nimmo is a guy
Okay,
that I want.
go ahead,
That I
talk
want to
about him.
mention. Look, he's a good defender. He has even splits against lefties and righties. He's about a 270 to 290 hitter. He gets on base at about 350 plus clip. He's got some speed. He doesn't steal a ton of bases, but he hits a lot of triples, a lot of doubles. Not a ton of power, but enough that he can probably hit 15, batting from the left side in Camden Yards. And he's going to play good defense. I really firmly believe that the Orioles are trading an outfielder this offseason, whether it's Hayes, Mullins, or Santander, or even a couple of those. And that would open the door for a guy like Brandon Nimmo, who I think is a dude that you can hit second in your order and be in a good spot.
I'd be very happy with Nimmo. Always
Yeah.
always been a strong on base guy. Great defender. Yeah, it's hard to argue with that for sure.
He is 100% the kind of guy that Mike Elias would want to bring in here. Maybe he doesn't have the power, but everything else he does is so good that I think he's a perfect Mike Elias type of player.
Do you prefer him to? I assume the answer is yes, but to a guy like Jock Peterson, who a lot of Orioles fans for some reason really want.
I hate Jock Peterson.
I have no interest in Jock Peterson.
So many people are on the Jock Peterson bandwagon, and I'm just like, look, guys, this past year was the best year of his career. It's the first time he's ever hit above 249. He had a 116 OPS, but the previous 2 years he had OPS plus. But the previous 2 years he was at like 80, 83, and 95. He's a very streaky hitter. I think he strikes out too much. He gets on base enough, but I don't look at him as an everyday player. I look at him as a guy who maybe plays 3 or 4 times a week. He's a pinch hitter, and he'll hit 30 home runs, but I think he's going to strike out and ground into a lot of double plays. For me, I don't look at him as an impact bat. Now, if the Orioles get an impact bat and then Jock Peterson, okay. But if he's the guy, I'm out.
I agree with that completely. He's a platoon guy for me, and not one that I have a ton of interest in. Honestly, I would rather sign like a Jurickson Profar than a Jock Peterson.
I would,
if I'm being honest.
If you gave me Brandon Nimmo and Jock Peterson, I'd be like, Jock who? Brandon Nimmo all the way.
Exactly. All right. This is another name. Well, I shouldn't say another. This is a name that I have not seen thrown around at all by anyone affiliated with the Orioles, fans, media, anybody. But it's a guy who I think fits a need in the lineup. The Orioles struggled against left-handed pitchers this year. They have for a while. This guy does not. I think he would come on the cheap, and I think he can be your super utility guy, and that's Brandon Drury. He's traded from the Reds to the Padres in the midst of a career year. Great against lefties. Not a spectacular defender, but he's fine wherever you put him. He can play some third base, some second, first, corner outfield if you need him to. He's fine. And I think he's a guy you can get at about $6 million.
Yeah,
for one season.
If he's willing to take on that kind of role, I don't think he's going to play every day if he comes here. And this is a guy who had a 2.6 B WAR this year, and for his career, his WAR is 2. So he had a negative B WAR before this season. He's got power. He's got good pop. You know, he got an opportunity to play a lot of baseball this year. He's only ever played over 130 games 3 times, and he's never played 140. He's a productive player. Again, not as the main guy, but as an add-on. But I don't know how many bats they're trying to get this offseason. If they sign him, I wouldn't poo-poo it. I just wouldn't get too fired up about it either.
Yeah, definitely not the main guy, and he's not going to sign a 1-year deal for $6 million in November or December.
Sure.
But come January and February, and we're starting to push into spring training a little bit, The season's getting rolling. Pitchers and catchers are starting to report. If this guy's still in the market, he's going to want to play ball. And I think he fits a need that the Orioles have, which is a utility guy who is going to be able to help you out against left-handed hitters.
Yeah. No,
So
I wouldn't hate the move. It fills a bit of a need. Also, again, remember, a right-handed hitter. He's a righty, right? Yeah, he's right-handed.
Drury,
And
yes.
yeah, remember, I'm specifically, unless it's Aaron Judge or Trey Turner, the guys I'm thinking about up here are left-handed, because that wall is not going to play for a right-handed free agent. And you can sit there and say, oh well, bring in Christian Walker. He hit 37 home runs last year. Christian Walker would hit 23 home runs if he came back to the Orioles.
Right.
So, not that he's available. That was just the first name that popped into my head.
Right. Yeah. Just a name that kind of I was looking through the free agents today and just kind of popped into my head. I was like, Brandon Drury would be interesting. Now, maybe not a necessary kind of player when you look at it in a vacuum, but a guy who I think could help the team.
Yeah, don't take it the wrong way, man. I'm not crapping on your guy. I just, if he signed, I'd be cool with it, but he's not like a desire of mine.
Yeah, no, look, this is just an exercise in what we would like to see. You don't have to agree with everything. I don't fault you for disagreeing with anything. But I do want to move on to pitchers unless you had any other bats on your mind.
Michael Brantley at the right price. I wouldn't mind seeing him again. That's another lefty. He had that shoulder surgery this past year. He struggles to stay healthy, but you bring him in, you let him play the outfield once or twice a week. You DH him a lot. He's a professional hitter. Michael Brantley's a guy that if the Orioles signed him, the veteran presence, knows how to win, and he can still hit. I wouldn't mind that. JD Martinez might be of the same ilk as Jose Abreu at this point. That's almost like signing a left-handed batter, because all of his home runs are oppo anyway. And even though he also power was down, I think he had 12 home runs this year. He's still a productive hitter. I think he had 12 home runs, but like 38 doubles. He's still a productive hitter. So somebody like that.
Very good hitter. All right. So we're gonna move on to pitchers. One guy that a lot of people have mentioned, and I am fully on board. This is probably my top target, and I didn't put him on my dream list because I think it's actually realistic, and that's Carlos Rodon. I think, and I know there was an article posted on Utah Street Report the other day about the risks associated with Rodon. I understand that. I don't disagree with it, but any pitcher is an injury risk. Yeah. Grayson Rodriguez had a clean bill of health, one of the cleanest deliveries you could imagine, and he missed 3 months last year with a lat strain. So anything can happen to any pitcher at any time. I understand he has a little bit of a clouded injury history. That doesn't concern me too much. I like Carlos Rodon at 4 years, $120 million. Do you think that gets it done?
Well, he opted out this year, and I think he was due to make more than that average annual value.
No, was he?
Yeah, I think so. I think he was due to make like $31 million this year. Like he signed some kind of ridiculous contract with San Francisco. Now, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I've been wrong before. I'll be wrong again.
I don't see what his salary was supposed to be in 2023. In 2022, he made $21.5 million.
Yeah, I think he was supposed to get less than that. I could have sworn that he signed for like that it was like the first year wasn't a ton, but then the second year was like over 30 million.
Like
or maybe I feel like I
like a backloaded kind of deal.
Being 40 million. I feel like I remember that, but it was just a
Carlos
number
Rodon.
I thought, it was just a number I remember hearing and being like, that's crazy. But like, why would he opt out of that? Let me see. But he would opt out to get more guaranteed years, right?
Yeah. If he thinks he can reach that same dollar amount.
Oh, it was 2 years, $44 million overall. So it would have been $23 million. So yes, that makes perfect sense. And I was wrong. I admit it. I say it here. I was wrong. My wife wishes I would say that more.
You can practice here wrong. And take it home.
Right. I am home. Yeah, Carlos Rodon. I feel like that's such a pipe dream. I feel like people just saw him and they're like, yeah. I think people were talking about Rodon before he ever even pitched a game for the Giants because they knew he had the opt out. He led the National League in strikeouts last year, and if the Orioles are going to spend a ton of money on him, I'm all for it. I just don't. I don't see them as being the high bidder. I think somebody's going to outbid them, and may even be the Giants. The Giants are rumored to be ready to spend big this offseason. Uh, if the Orioles are the team that lands Rodon, then we have really seen a changing of the tide here in Baltimore, and I have to see it to believe it. Same thing with
I
Turner and Judge.
Yeah, I mean that's the way it is. And that's the way it has been. Rodon, I think if the Orioles are serious about going out and getting a true number one starting pitcher,
Mm-hmm.
and I haven't heard anything to this point that leads me to believe that they're going to neglect that market. I think they're going to go after Rodon, and I think they're going to go after him hard. Now, that's just based on my opinion. I don't have any
I
information
hope
on
you're right.
that.
I hope you're
I
right.
hope I'm right too, because he's a hell of a pitcher, and I think he's exactly what this rotation needs. A veteran presence on the mound who's going to strike out a ton of guys. The Orioles haven't had a big strikeout guy in a while. There we go.
Turner.
Carlos Rodon, bring him to
Yep.
Baltimore. Rodon and Trey Turner. I'm into that.
Yeah. If
Um,
those were the two signings to do, is that the two things the Orioles do this offseason? Hell yeah, I'm ready.
Absolutely. So we'll see with that whether or not they're actually going to go out and get a big name guy. I don't see them landing a DeGrom or a Verlander or a Kershaw. I think you mentioned Chris Bassett. I think that's realistic. The other name I had on here in terms of starting pitchers was Mike Clevenger.
I thought about him
Another
today.
another guy who's had some bad luck with injuries, but I don't think is going to command much on the free agent market. Spotrac has his market value a little over $10 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
I like Clevenger at 3 years, $24 million with opt outs after years 1 and 2. I think
Yeah,
that's a deal that he could get behind and prove that he's worth sticking around. And then he'll ultimately get to make that decision. Do I think I'm worth more money? Yeah, I do. I'm going to go back. I'm going to opt out and go out on the market.
yeah, I wouldn't hate that deal. It's a make good deal for him because he's been
Yeah.
injury riddled the last couple of seasons. I didn't realize he's already 32 years old. I thought
Yeah.
I thought that Clevenger was like 27.
He feels like he feels like a really young guy.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I would love that. I would love Clevenger here at the right price. 3 years, 24 million on its surface doesn't seem like a ton, but when you throw in the two opt outs, that's a nice make good contract for a guy. And if he has an opportunity to make good by pitching to Adley Rutschman, which I also think is a great selling point for a free agent pitcher, is
Oh yeah.
hey, we got Adley Rutschman, who it might be a generational catcher, and you're like, hell yeah, let's get this done.
And it's
So
389 feet to left field.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, I would be on board for Clevenger. I'd be on board for Rodon. There's not really a ton of starting pitchers out there that the Orioles could sign at that number that I wouldn't be at a high number that I wouldn't be on board with.
Yeah. Do you have a number in your head for a guy like Bassett who you like?
Just going based off what I saw, I think that they could. I don't know, 3 years, 51 million. You know, if because he's 34. So he's in his mid 30s. You give him 3 years of 17 mil a year to be a number one or number two for you. Maybe he's not an ace overall, but he's a guy who's going to compete for you every single day. He's been around the league a while, so that he can be a mentor, a veteran leadership guy for guys like Grayson Rodriguez and DL Hall. Chris Bassett at 17 million a year, I think is a good price for a guy that has all those intangibles.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that's a reasonable deal. I think that's one that would be enticing to him. I'm not sure there will be a lot of 3-year deals out there for him.
Mm-hmm.
And so if the Orioles are willing to offer that, I think that's definitely realistic. And then the last guy on my list, and I've been beating the drum on this guy for a while, Rafael Montero. I think you can get him for 2 years, 15 mil. And he's going to immediately be a back end of your bullpen guy. Pitch him in the 7th or the 8th inning in front of Felix Bautista, and your bullpen's set. I love Rafael Montero. He's the guy I want if the Orioles are going to make a bullpen signing.
Really nice year this year. It was his first really nice year.
Yeah.
I think of Miguel Castro a lot when I watch him pitch. I just think of a guy who can be dominant, but then if he loses it, he loses it. You know what I mean? And for me, I wouldn't hate Montero. I wouldn't hate David Robertson. He had a really nice bounce back this year for the Cubs and then the Phillies. He split time between the two teams, and he basically was just kind of trying to prove everybody wrong when he had a really unfortunate circumstance with the Tommy John surgery. It was a bad rehab from it,
Yeah.
and he pitched really poorly. They thought that his career was done. He went and pitched in the Olympics, and then he comes back. And I think you talked about this. And then he comes back and is dominant this past year. And I also maybe Adam Ottavino at the right price, veteran guy who with this pitching, the way that like Chris Holt and all his guys, the way that they developed pitching, the way that they made all these other guys better, I feel like they could do something and get a little bit more juice out of that squeeze with Ottavino.
I could see that. I think there are definitely some good options out there. Miguel Castro's only 28 years old.
Yeah.
He's not even 28 yet.
They had him.
That's surprising.
I mean, remember the Blue Jays made him their closer when he was like 21, like fresh out of the minors. They made him their closer at like 21 years old.
That's true.
Yeah. I just don't know that the Orioles are going to spend a ton of money on relief pitching. So I feel like they could get some of those older guys who still have a little bit of something left at a reasonable price.
I think that's a fair assessment for sure. Looking down this list, a lot of former Orioles on here. Zach Britton, Michael Givens. You mentioned Miguel Castro, Darren O'Day, still I guess a free agent. I didn't know he was still in the league.
Yeah.
Paul Fry. No, we're not going to sign any of those guys. Chris Ellis.
Paul Fry, bring him
Tommy
back.
Hunter. Tommy Hunter. Travis Lakins. There's some names on here, man.
Oh man,
honestly,
some names that we know, right? Just some names that we know.
If the Orioles could sign Tommy Hunter at whatever the league minimum is, I'm all on board with that. I love me some Tommy Hunter. I feel
he pitched for the Mets.
Yeah, I'd like to see Tommy Hunter come back more than Mancini, if I'm being honest. That might be a bold take, but realistically, I don't think either of those moves will be good for the Orioles. But love me some big game Tommy Hunter.
Right.
All right, moving on. The Orioles 40-man is now at 34 players after Jordan Lyles was granted free agency, Daz Cameron was claimed, and then Anthony Benboom was outrighted to AAA Norfolk. Cam Gallagher was outrighted as well, elected free agency, which is his right as a veteran. It'll be 35 on the 40-man roster once John Means is activated, and
tomorrow.
Then we will surely see. Is that tomorrow? Oh, I guess so. Yeah, start at the beginning of free agency. I expect to see a couple DFAs at some point throughout the offseason. I don't think they'll do it until they're forced to do it when they have a 40-man roster crunch. They're going to have to add Grayson Rodriguez and Joey Ortiz for sure. Drew Rom, I think, will be added. That puts him at 36. No, I'm sorry. That puts them at 38. I got ahead of myself there. The two biggest DFA candidates I see are Tyler Nevin and Yusniel Diaz. I think we talked about
100%.
this last week.
100%. I think Yusniel Diaz is guaranteed. And he might actually be done. He might actually be DFA before they have to add guys for the Rule 5. Tyler Nevin, for some reason, they really like him. I don't see it. I think that he's made a lot out of just his name, but I don't think he's ever going to be the player that a lot of people thought he might be this time last year. So Tyler Nevin, I think, is a good one too to be DFA'd.
Yeah, there was a time there was a lot of hype around Tyler Nevin. We were excited about him.
I couldn't believe it. I remember I was at the gym last year, and people was talking about like, well, if they trade Mancini, I'm okay with it because they have Tyler Nevin. And I was like, no. And Zach Goodman was like, I think Tyler Nevin can give you as much production as Mancini at this point, and he clearly cannot. Tyler Nevin he's a guy who has pop, but he's very middling. I mean, he took one 440-foot home run at the end of the season in 2021 and rode that lightning for a good while.
Yeah, absolutely. One name I wanted to throw out there, put on waivers by the Tampa Bay Rays today, Nick Anderson. Does he interest you at all? He's been injured the past 2 seasons and kind of lost his form, but there was a time when he looked like an elite relief pitcher. He has a career 2.89 ERA, 137 strikeouts in 87 and a third innings. Do you think the Orioles put in a claim on him?
I don't know if they do or not. I mean, if they do, and he can, I'm interested in anybody that can help this team win. And if Nick Anderson can help the Orioles win, then I'm interested in Nick Anderson. Again, right price.
Yeah. Well, he's his projected salary this year. I think Jeff Passan tweeted about this earlier. It's about $850K.
Yeah.
That's not bad for a guy who might be a dominant bullpen arm.
If he can stay healthy and get back to that productivity they had before the injuries, then absolutely, I'm interested in Nick Anderson. If he helps the Orioles win, I'm interested in him.
Okay. I agree. I think I think he's worth taking a flyer on at this point. Last thing I want to do in this episode, Paul, I have a trade that I came up with. I didn't really come up with it. It's been talked about a lot, but I added a little bit to it. And I think it's going to be a bit of a surprise for you. Do you have any trades that you'd like to see the Orioles make? Any specific trades or just in general, certain guys you'd like to see get traded, a certain guy you'd like to see acquired?
See, the guys I want to see traded is a guy like Austin Hayes because I think we've seen what he's going to be. I think he's had every opportunity to prove that he's going to be like this game-changing player, and he shows glimpses. But that 3 month stretch where he couldn't hit his way out of a wet paper bag last year was all I needed to see to be like, I think I'm done. I think I'm done with him. But I don't know. Fans tend to overvalue the players on their teams, right?
Agreed.
So I'm trying to be realistic about it. I don't know that Austin Hayes fetches you much if it's not in the package. So I don't know that I guess I don't have any trades in mind because I don't. I think that the Orioles are going to have to trade from their list of prospects to get and like you probably need to trade like Cedric Mullins and then Jordan Westberg to get a Pablo Lopez or Jesus Luzardo. And for me, I'm not. I don't want to overvalue my guy, so I'm not. I don't want to put a trade out there and be like, that's not even close to what it would take. Just so like when people
That's
are talking
fair.
about, oh, look, we should trade for Otani. Well, are you willing to give up Grayson Rodriguez, DL Hall, and Jordan Westberg to get him? Because that's where the conversation is going to start. You know, and I'm not
Exactly.
sure I have interest in that.
It is hard to come up with trade scenarios because they're never, like you said, people value their own guys and they're never completely fair. It's never exactly what another team wants. But I have a scenario here that I think is at least somewhat realistic. And it's a name that has been floated around as a potential trade candidate for the Orioles for a while. And that's Pablo Lopez of the Marlins. You just mentioned him a second ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think he is I think the Marlins are looking to trade him. I think the Orioles are looking to acquire someone like him. And so the trade scenario I came up with, because the Marlins need bats, the Orioles need arms. The Marlins have arms, the Orioles have bats. I'm looking at something like Austin Hayes, Jordan Westberg, Hudson Haskin, and maybe a 19 or 20-year-old starting pitcher that's down, and maybe someone in the Dominican Summer League, a guy who's a few years away but has some upside as a pitcher. Package those four to the Marlins for Pablo Lopez, and here's my surprise, Sixto Sanchez. Do you think there is any merit to that? I think the Marlins are ready to move on from Sixto. I think his stock is at an all-time low. It's someone I'd like to see the Orioles go after if they're trying to get something for the Marlins.
I saw your trade in the notes, and it says surprise in parentheses. I thought it was asking if I was surprised that you would offer that trade, and my answer was going to be
No,
yes.
no.
Because I think that's an overpay with those three guys. I felt like that was an overpay for Pablo Lopez. But when you throw in Sixto Sanchez, it might be an underpay.
See, I wanted to see your reaction, which is why I didn't put his name in the notes.
Yeah, if they're going to throw in Sixto Sanchez, and I agree, his stock is probably at an all-time low right now. Shout out to the Baltimore guys. Austin Hayes, Jordan Westberg, Hudson Haskin, and I think you'd probably have to throw in. I don't know, man. You probably have to throw in
maybe a pitcher a little better than a DSL guy.
I don't know. Maybe you have to throw in like a Gene Pinto or something.
I would do that.
Yeah,
I would do that.
To get Pablo Lopez and Sixto Sanchez. I'll tell you right now, my bold prediction for this offseason is that Pablo Lopez will be traded to the Orioles. I just have no idea for what. I think that the Orioles and Marlins are a trade match made in heaven, and I think that the Orioles are going to get Pablo Lopez from them. I have no idea for what. And when you throw in Sixto Sanchez, And those three players that you mentioned, Hayes, Westberg, Hudson Haskin, and then got to be one more guy. They're going to have to add one more guy because Westberg, minor league player of the year for the Orioles. Hudson Haskin is a really nice player all around. And then Austin Hayes kind of drags it down a little bit. I don't know who that fourth guy would have to be. I think it might have to be like a Gene Pinto. But I would do it.
Yeah.
I would do that. But I'm so terrible at these.
It's
I have no idea what's enough, what's not enough. You know, the fact that the Ravens got Roquan Smith for a 2 and a 5, I would have thought they had to give up first round picks for a guy like Roquan Smith. So
yeah.
I have no idea in professional sports what trades get things done these days. No
Yeah.
clue.
Look, if I threw this on Twitter, I don't know if Marlins fans would be like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Or I would do that in a heartbeat. I have no idea. I don't know what exactly it is that they want. I know that they're looking for bats. I know they want impact bats. Jordan Westberg is more than capable. Austin Hayes has shown in the past that he could be.
Yeah,
And Hudson Haskin.
when you post on Twitter, just post it with a highlight video of Austin Hayes hitting for the cycle in 6 innings in the rain.
Yeah, just leave it at that.
Yeah.
No, look, I like Austin Hayes. I don't think I think he's got something left in the tank.
Oh, I think he's got something left in the tank. I don't know that he's.
I think
he played
he's
hurt most of the year, and
he got stepped on, and you could see the scar on the back of his hand, and still in September and October.
And he got hit on the wrist like 3 times by pitches.
Yeah, in like a week.
Yeah, he stands so damn close to the plate. I feel like he played hurt a lot this year. We've seen glimpses, and he was really good the second half of 2021, and really good the first 3 months of 2022. We haven't seen him put one full season together yet, and I don't have faith that he's ever going to do it because I don't think he's going to stay healthy. He plays so hard, he's going to keep getting hurt.
Are you about to pull up this comment too?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Go ahead.
Who would you rather have long term, Norby or Westberg? I think Westberg is more versatile. I think Norby's got a better hit tool. But I think that the hit tool is similar enough that I'd probably go Westberg because Westberg he can do a bunch of different things for you. Norby's kind of a second baseman that's going to hit for average, a little bit of pop, and Westberg can do. I think he can do a little bit more. But they're both. If you trade Westberg, I don't hate it because you still have Norby. If you trade Norby, I don't hate it because you still have Westberg. I like both of them a lot. I think that you're good either way.
I thought about this exact question when I was coming up with my trade scenario for the Marlins.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided, and it's a tough decision. Like you said, if you trade one, you're happy that you still have the other. But I put Jordan Westberg in my trade because I think I would rather have Connor Norby long term.
I think he's got a better hit tool. I think Westberg's a better athlete.
I agree with that. I'm not as concerned with the defense. I think Westberg is going to end up a second baseman based on what the Orioles already have.
Mm-hmm.
That's where Norby's going to play anyway. I don't think there's too much of a drop off defensively. Norby has always been able to just flat out rake. And finally, this past season, we saw the power really come together. He hit 29 home runs between 3 levels. He started the season in Aberdeen, started off pretty slow, still managed a promotion to Bowie, and was dominant, and then gets promoted to Norfolk for the last couple weeks of the season and was even better.
Yeah, you look at Norby and Colton Cowser. They were both drafted last year, and their first full season in pro ball, they ended the season in AAA. Man, the Orioles' future is so bright. It's God, it's so awesome. And Norby hit 400 his last 2 years in college. He's an insane hitter. You're good either way. I think with Westberg or Norby, you're good either way.
I agree, and I don't know if it's because Norby went to ECU, which is where my fiance went to school, or if it's because Jordan Westberg wouldn't take a selfie with me when I saw him at Bowie earlier this year. But no, I like Connor Norby a lot. I think he's got a bright future. And I think other teams honestly will value Westberg more in a trade. And I think the Orioles are going to trade one of those infielders, whether it's Norby, Westberg, or Joey Ortiz, maybe even Darrell Hernandez. But I think Westberg has the most return value there, which is why I put him in a trade for Lopez and Sixto Sanchez. But
are you okay
see what happens
with the Orioles trading Mateo and letting Joey Ortiz be the opening day shortstop? if they don't sign Trey Turner.
What do we get back from Mateo?
Probably not a lot, honestly. There's not too
Yeah, I
much
would do
getting.
it. I would.
The
Yeah.
I mean, the defense is going to be comparable, right? He may have a little bit more
Yeah.
range than Ortiz, but Ortiz is nasty with the glove, and I think he's gonna end up being a better hitter. I really believe he's a better hitter than Mateo is right now. Um,
Yeah. I would
I
be.
think
I
I
would be
think I'd
fine with
be
that.
I think I would be too. I just don't think that you can have. And man, I really do like Jorge Mateo. The
Me
glove is
too.
so
Yeah.
good, and he's so fast, and he's electric.
There's
But
no slander here.
he hit 221 with a 267 on base percentage. That your everyday shortstop can't do that in the AL East if you expect to be competitive. You just that he led the American League in stolen bases, and he had a 267 on base percentage. Like, imagine what he could do if he ever learned how to hit.
Okay, maybe there is a little slander here.
Um,
I I had people coming at me on Twitter yesterday because someone was like, "Don't slander Mateo like that." So I don't know. I put out my offseason wish list, and it started off with sign DeGrom and Rodon, and then it was trade Mateo and Arias, and it got just more ridiculous as I went on, and ended with bring back Chris Davis and extend Lamar Jackson.
oh yeah, I
And
saw that, dude.
people still took it seriously. It was
I
hilarious.
it's crazy to me how butthurt people get when you talk about trading their favorite players that are very middling at best players. Like
Yeah.
Jorge Mateo, what's his weakness? He can't hit. That's no secret. You can't have a guy that hits 221 with a 267 on base percentage and tell me that that I'm wrong. Like, he's a good defender. He can play a ton of different positions. He's stupid fast, but he can't hit. And it blows my mind how upset people get if you like trade this guy, or I'd rather this guy play, or I'd rather you sign this guy. Like, I want the team to be better. What do you want? You want to like root for guys who don't make you better. I don't know. I mean, and that's not to say that is slander. That is slander because Jorge Mateo made the Orioles better this year. He was
Yes, he
incredible
did.
this year. But I want somebody who can add something to the offense, because what wins ball games, Ryan? Scoring runs. You have to score more
Scoring
runs than the
runs,
opposition. So,
ideally.
yeah.
Look, Mateo had about a month and a half stretch where he was one of the best offensive shortstops in baseball, and he
Mm-hmm.
still ended the season, like you said, with a 267 on base percentage, 646 OPS. That
Yeah.
doesn't cut it. That's not going to cut it in the bigs. And yeah, you've got a guy in Ortiz who you've said this many times before on this show and your other one. Ortiz's glove has been major league ready since he was drafted.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I mean,
so,
Keith Law told us when I was still producing Glenn Clark Radio. He told us he expected Joey Ortiz to be the Orioles starting shortstop this after the All Star break this past season. So he said the
oh
glove's been
wow,
ready for years. Joey Ortiz is just as good a defender. Maybe not quite up there, but he's still a damn good defender, and he's going to hit better. If you gave me my choice, I'd say Joey Ortiz, your starting shortstop, and I would make Jorge Mateo a super utility guy.
I have to agree with that. I think Mateo can play anywhere in the field. He's got some outfield experience. You could do that. Make him your fourth outfielder, backup infielder. Then you have to consider you've got a guy like Terran Vavra. What happens with him? But I don't want to. That's a whole other thing to get into. I think we are about to wrap up. Although I will pull up Chris's last question. Thank you for your engagement, Chris. We appreciate it.
Really
We're
do.
still trying to get a little more popular here. I know we get a decent amount of viewers on Twitter, but they can't comment along with the show. But is Mateo even more valuable with the new pickoff rule? Is he even more valuable? Sorry, I read that wrong. I'd like to see him as a super utility, but hate to waste him like that. I don't think it's a waste.
Yeah, I mean, like I said about Jared Dyson earlier, Jared Dyson made a career out of being that guy. You know, he was a World Series hero out of being that guy. Dave Roberts did the same thing. So I don't think you're wasting him. I think that you're keeping him in the big leagues longer, because at some point somebody's be like, dude, you can't play shortstop for me if you can't have a better slash line than that. You just can't. You know,
Yeah.
you're keeping by having him be a super utility guy, which is ultimately, unless the bat completely turns around, that's what he is. Um, you're prolonging his career. You're keeping him in the big leagues as a super utility guy. And is he more valuable with a new pickoff role? Well, here's the thing: you can try and pick a guy off a third time, but if you don't pick him off, it's a balk. how many times is he going to get picked off thinking that he's got free reign, uh, because it's
A
already been
few.
thrown over twice.
Definitely a few times. Look, there's been a lot of talk about how the
It's a stupid
bigger
freaking rule. I
bases.
almost said the F word. It's a stupid rule.
I don't care. I don't think Derek would care. Yeah, it's a bad rule. There's been a lot of talk about it's going to improve stolen bases, the pickoff rule, and the wider bases. I don't see that happening a ton. Like you said, a pitcher can still attempt a third pickoff move. They just have to be successful. So it's not like a player can just, oh, he's already picked off twice. I can get a massive lead and break early. No, that's not how it works.
Mm-hmm.
You pitcher can step off and get you just like he could the first two times. So you still have to be a smart base runner. You still have to be able to get the right kind of jump. It'll help a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be significant.
And the other thing is that what they're going to do is they're going to have video. They're going to have charts that show tendencies, right? So these pitchers are going to know which guys are more likely to steal than the other guys after that second pickoff attempt.
Absolutely.
And they're going to know that, and they might think to themselves, you know what? He's probably going to end up on second base anyway, so maybe I can pick him off. But if I don't, he just ends up where he was going to go anyway, especially with a guy like Mateo. So they might be more willing to try it because 6 of one, half dozen of the other in their mind. But I just have to say it again because I haven't had a chance really to talk about it. This is the dumbest rule implementation I have ever heard in my entire life. You can only pick off twice. It's so stupid. It's so stupid, and I just hate it. Baseball's not so broken that we need to do ridiculous things like you can't throw over. I agree with the pitch clock. I've become on board with a 3 batter minimum for a pitcher, even though I still hate that rule too. I can be on board with that. Limiting the amount of time somebody can. Now, if you limit it to 6 times or 5 times, okay, because you'll see a guy throw over 8 times in a row because he's scared to throw to the guy at the plate, or he's scared that the guy's going to steal. But twice, like, get out of here! Like, get out of here! It's like roughing the passer if you tap Tom Brady on the elbow.
By the way, Lamar Jackson finally got a roughing the passer call.
Yeah, right.
So shout out to that. Surprising, but I'm ready to wrap up. I don't know about you. We've been on here for close to 80 minutes. I have a Chick-fil-A sandwich that got here about 3 minutes before we started, so I would love to eat that. I have a kitty to check on. I think that was a pretty good off-season preview. Is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap this up?
Nah, man. I'm talked out. I'm so nervous and so excited at the same time about what's going to happen. Like I'm excited that, oh my God, they're going to go sign these players, and I'm nervous that their idea of liftoff is like Jock Peterson and re-signing Jordan Lyles for like $8 million instead of I'm so this franchise, the fans of this franchise over the last 40 years, we are just so what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the damn word. I can never think of it. But we're just like we're like a beaten puppy. You know what I mean?
I guess so.
It's just like we're so used to just getting crushed for so long that we all have PTSD and have no I won't believe they do anything until they do it. Although I will say that again, Mike Elias has done everything he said he was going to do. I have nothing to say, and I'm still long-winded again. I'm just excited and nervous at the same time.
That's okay. I'm also very excited. I'm also very nervous. Who knows what this offseason is going to look like? I think Mike Elias has an idea, and I hope that idea comes full circle. We shall see.
Yeah.
Thank you to those of you who tuned in. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which actually I got an email the other day. We're not at 100 subscribers yet. We're not even close, but I can change the URL. I don't know what we did to deserve that. But when we're done here, I'm going to hop on there and change our URL. So it'll be youtube.com/GiveThatFan a Podcast.
Oh, that's awesome.
So please subscribe there. I guess you can also subscribe on the other places you listen to this. That'd be cool.
I'm wondering if it's because after you post a certain number of times that you now are, maybe that's something, maybe because we're on show like 30 or 27, that they're like, okay, they're legitimate.
Yeah, it has something to do either with that or with us going live now. I'm not really sure.
Gotcha.
But in any event, I'm glad we get to do that. Thank you, as always, to Derek and Tony at Utah Street Report for hosting the pod. We will see you probably in 2 weeks on Give That Fan a Podcast.